You can connect now.
Are we on?
Yeah, but was she upset?
I can see Jackie talking as I see. Yeah.
I have to go to her house and explain what happened. Number one, she
Unmute your mic.
because she has a ballet recital. Number two,
Hello, for those who have joined, please mute your mics. Thank you. We're coming to you live in a few seconds. Thank you so much. Welcome to you just joining. Welcome. Mr. Dave Williams at the radio station. Dave, are you there? All right. Like I said, I want to welcome each and every one of you to the program. I want to welcome each one of you to the program, Transforming Lives. We're live streaming. We're just trying to get connected to Global 99.5. Thank you for your patience. Just give us a few more seconds. Global 99.5. All right, on our program, we're going to be talking, just prepping you before we are fully connected. We're going to be talking about a new perspective. We have two guests. They will be making a very short presentation. And then at the end of that presentation, we'll be taking your questions. This promises to be a very lively, powerful, interactive experience. So please gather your questions because they are welcomed guests. They are equipped and they are well able to answer those questions. Unfortunately, as we work in this new normal, technology sometimes creates a challenge. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about this new normal and new perspective. And one of the things that we will be dealing with is technology. And technology, obviously, at this moment, is giving us a challenge. Welcome once again. I see more persons joining us. Welcome once again to Transforming Lives. We really appreciate the fact that you are here.
Jackie, hi.
Hi, you're finally in.
Yes, you can introduce a guest.
We can start?
Yes.
All right. We are
Oh,
up and
mention your
running.
sponsor. Your sponsor, you forget.
Yes, we're up and running, and you are listening to the program Transforming Lives on Global 99.5, Facebook, cable channel 974, and of course, we're on YouTube and Zoom. Welcome to Transforming Lives. Our program is sponsored by Sunshine Deli and also by QuickBooks. Okay, it's good, like we've said, for you to be here. All right, as we start working and living in what is now deemed the new normal, we recognize that we need to adopt in the Bahamas and around the world to a new perspective in terms of how we not just survive, but we thrive
You say he got it from me, right?
in
Or
light.
you got off this phone. This phone ain't picking up Wi-Fi.
We thrive in light of this new normal. We need to be intentional. We need to ensure that we set the right mindset, that we have the right mindset, we have the motivation and the correct methods to utilize as we move forward. And so our topic is a new perspective, and we will be speaking about a new perspective from the financial standpoint of view and also from a spiritual standpoint of view. And we have two guests in the house. They are, like I said, well able to take on this subject. In the interest of time, I'm going to quickly introduce our first guest. Our first guest is legendary. He is Mr. Kirby Ferguson, a chartered accountant. He earned his fellow designation from the Chartered Association of Certified Accountant in the UK. He's the principal of K.E. Ferguson and Co., an adjunct professor at the University of the Bahamas. Our distinctive guest has a wealth of experience in the financial market, having worked both locally and internationally. He's a husband, he's a father, he's an elder. Ladies and gentlemen, viewers, friends, let me take this opportunity now to introduce you to our first guest, Mr. Kirby Ferguson.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And an interesting topic, a new perspective. And is there anything new under the sun? Question is asked. And so the challenge really becomes, how do we reorganize the information that's in front of us to create something that is new? By way of introduction, Ms. Garden indicated, advised that I am a chartered accountant. I like to think I'm a chartered accountant / entrepreneur, having started and nurtured my own practice for over 10 years now. But what is this new perspective? And first, I think it's important that we frame this in the environment that we now find ourselves in. And that's this one of the COVID-19 and how it's really impacting our lives, our businesses, our plans, and we cannot ignore it. As a matter of fact, I think it is the catalyst for a new financial perspective. So I've really identified three scenarios of where we're at and where we may find ourselves over the next 3 to 4 months. And the first one is our COVID infection rates decreases, our market recovers, and everybody goes back to normal. Our workforce adjusts for the gains that we may have acquired in this virtual environment. So pretty much it's business as usual, but now we know we don't have to come into the office for a meeting. We can now Zoom, and there's no excuse for not attending a scheduled meeting. Wherever you're at, you just join us either by laptop or by cell phone. All right, that's the perfect scenario. And then there's the second scenario, and this is the one I guess we dread. And this one, infection rates do not decrease, and the Bahamas is deemed unsafe for visitors. And this would require quite a bit of structural adjustments within our economy, if for nothing else, to protect the value of the Bahamian dollar. In order to do so, there'll be increased government borrowing and expenditure, and efforts made by the government to prop up our economy. There'll be depressed market conditions and naturally business failures and even more unemployment. This is the scenario we do not wish upon ourselves. And then there's the third scenario, and this is the one I think is the hybrid of both of the aforementioned scenarios. And I think this is the one that we're probably going to be facing. We simply learn to live with COVID-19. And our infection rate is modest. Each day we're all tracking what's coming out in the number of confirmed cases. It'll be good to see the graph now, because I think we are consistently now, certainly in New Providence, around 40 to 50 infections, thereabout, maybe topping up to 60, but almost a consistent flattening, not decreasing, but certainly we are plateauing in our daily reports. So I would dare say we learn to live with COVID-19, and it will be another infection that we have to manage. If that happens, then modest tourist arrival, and that in itself is going to be impacted not only by how well we manage our condition over the next month leading up to about Thanksgiving, that will make the outside world somewhat comfortable coming to the Bahamas. But our primary source of inflow of business is Florida. And they have their own challenges in Florida with the infection rate, their own market unemployment. As you know, we feed off Floridians in terms of our tourist market. Well, they depend on a tourist market themselves. And so it's a travel destination. So some of the same challenges we're facing, they are definitely facing. The cruise business, which was a big part of the Florida's economy, they are challenged with the CDC regulations and when they could get going. And the agriculture industry, which fed the tourist industry, the cruise business, those are challenged. So Florida in itself has its own set of challenges, which we are looking for to get our business. And then there's something that people don't recognize and we don't talk about much. But on the way here, I had to top up my gas, and I realized I haven't been to the gas station for such a long time. And what would have cost me $80 to $100 to fill up, I realized I was filling up for $40.
Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's good currently, but imagine the economies that are dependent on a strong oil price and what that is saying to those economies. And Florida, Texas, and those, they're dependent on the oil industry themselves. So they are being impacted. So naturally, we feel that all we have to do is get our act together and tourists will come. But the challenge is the market that we're sourcing that traffic from has its challenges. And then hovering over that is the US elections that's coming up, and the uncertainty that arises from that in terms of will there be a change in administration? Will it be more of the same? And so tourist arrival, I would anticipate will be moderate. And remember, most of our boom in the tourist industry was coming from an environment where Mr. Trump was really having a banner season in terms of creating employment and a buoyant US economy, which has now been shattered. And so our return to those old touristic numbers may be somewhat challenged. So with our modest arrival in tourist arrival, I would anticipate that we'll see more unemployment, but I would say we will see more confirmation of unemployment because quite a few people are just on leave from their jobs, unpaid leaves, and we may see a confirmation of those unpaid leaves. And naturally, we'll see some business failures. However, with the return to the employment market and trying to operate as business as usual, there will be some rehiring. And please, if you're over 40 now, I may say some things that may be somewhat offensive. And please, if you're a praying person, pray that my utterances were just utterances and not prophetic. But I think the rehiring in the labor market will be somewhat strategic. And I think the new hires are going to be 40 years or younger. We will be targeting a younger employment sector. And I'll tell you why in a bit. Well, I'll tell you now. These young persons, during this COVID time, we've realized that we could do a lot more with technology. And the people who are best adapted dealing with that technology are new college graduates and are under 40s. Some of us are still calling our kids to help us just to log on to Zoom, and that should be telling you something, right? The market is starting to move away from you, but don't lose heart just yet. So these young persons, they're tech savvy, and I can tell you, some assignments you give to some of us older folks, you go, well, this should take about a day or so to get done, and it's some spreadsheet or some tech type exercise, and you give a similar assignment to one of these young bucks, and within an hour's time, they come back to you and you go, excuse me, and they go, oh, I'm finished. And so you start to see very quickly that these kids are extremely tech savvy. And some stuff that have some of us struggling for a whole day, they can do within an hour. Now, there's the wisdom thing that comes with that, but we'll get there. So they're tech savvy, and so I think most of our rehires are going to come from that sector. And besides, those of you who are over 40, you'll come with so much baggage. You need a package. You need this. You need that. You answer back. Well, they answer back too, but you know. You're going to find for the price of 2 young bucks, it will cost me less than 1 40-year-old. And I get twice the burn, right? I also see in this hybrid market a reduction in salary levels, earning capacity, because if you look at it, over 40% of our labor force is unemployed. Do you think employers are going to bring back people at the same salaries? They're going to seek an opportunity now to ease their payroll. And guess what? If you are unemployed and somebody else is unemployed, both of you are fighting for the same job. I may be more willing to reduce my asking price to get that job than my competitor. So I would see it's going to become a buyer's market, and I can see salary levels will start to decrease. It's simple as that. So having said all that and create this backdrop, and I'm not a prophet of doom, it's just I'm a businessman. I know what I'm looking at over the next 3 to 4 months and how I'm positioning myself. However, I would say in this environment, I'm going to see the rise of the entrepreneur. The rise of the entrepreneur. I think we've entered into a new season, a wonderful new season, and I say do not waste a crisis. The old season that we were in, it was structured to support a certain business class, a certain pecking order. And what COVID has done, it's come through like a hurricane and demolished a lot of those old structures, which now creates a wonderful opportunity for those of us who wish to go into business. I am not promising you it's going to be easy, but I am promising you that a lot of opportunities that didn't exist before are now available. Just by way of backdrop, one of my pet peeves. I would call the last 5 to 6 months in our country, and when our history is written, I would call them the wasted 5 to 6 months. What do I mean? Well, I think we were presented with an opportunity with the shutdown, with the unemployment, with all that time on our hands. There used to be a time when most of us would say, boy, if I could only find some time, what I would do. If I only didn't have my phone ringing so much, what would I do? I think for the most part, well, let me be nice. Maybe some of us, there's the silent majority and we don't hear from them. But so many of us have wasted the past 5 to 6 months. We sat in fear. We spend all day listening to talk shows that just feed one negativity after the next. And the reality is, if we understand most of those talk shows, they all get their agenda. Either you're pro-government, you're next government, you think Mr. Minister is doing a wonderful job, you think he's not doing a wonderful job. After you've heard 2 or 3 talk shows, you realize, all I'm hearing is somebody who's going to confirm my views one way or the other. I don't need to be feeding on that every single day. So what do I do now? I will start to listen, and if it's not a positive discussion, I switch it off. Right. But so many of our people, we've been feeding on this stuff, and I might as well tell you, I'm somewhat disappointed in us as a collective people, in that when we had an opportunity to come together, when we had an opportunity to show our resilience, when we had an opportunity to show our ingenuity, we became a people full of fear, criticism, ingratitude, lack of ideas, and simply negativity throughout. So I call it the wasted 6 months. I would think, however, there's a remnant among us who sat quietly and used the time wisely. Those of you who don't know, my MBA is in entrepreneurship. And one of the key things in entrepreneurship is optimism. Most traits of entrepreneurs is that they are optimistic. They believe that they can overcome. They believe that they can overachieve. They believe that they are winners. They can cause something to happen that others do not see. The unfortunate thing, though, is how do you become an entrepreneur if all you're doing is sitting down all day listening to negative communications? Even the Bible will tell you, death and life is in the power of the tongue, and a merry heart doeth good like medicine. If your heart isn't merry because you're saddled with negativity, what kind of medicine that is for you? But I know we have a ref here, so I'm going to leave that alone for now. I would say this, though. Today, I tune into my church's broadcast. We're still live streaming. and it's Christian Life Church, and my pastor, Jay Sims, and his topic was an encouraging word. And it says, David encouraged himself in the Lord. When he was facing his most difficult time, he encouraged himself in the Lord. I think there was a reason for that. And I would like to think that there's so many Davids, right, Brother Williams, who, who are out there encouraging ourselves in the Lord.
Amen to that.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. And so we're going to feed from that positivity. We're going to encourage ourselves, and over the next 3 to 4 months, position ourselves to really, really be the remnant that we are. So I call it the rise of the entrepreneur. Remember I said most of the rehires are going to come from 40 years and younger? I would think most of the entrepreneurs, however, are going to be those same 40-year-olds and above. Because at 40 years, round about 40 years, it's a generational thing. And about 40 years, you have just enough experience to know your way, to navigate your way within the system. You also, hopefully, if you're unemployed, got a nice little package that you didn't spend all of. So you have some resources. You do have the contacts. You know who to call to make some things happen. So I believe the rise of the entrepreneur is going to be those same 40-year-olds. Now, if you leave it for too long, starting a business takes so much energy. But anyway, 40 years, I think it's a good balance between experience, energy, resources, and skills. I also believe, though, that most of us who get into our business need to ask ourselves this one question: what is in your hand? And you say, where does good ideas come from? Well, oftentimes it's finding a need and filling it, but asking yourself, what is in your hand? For instance, you may have been the IT manager at a certain at a particular institution, and they let you go. But guess what? You walk up with that IT knowledge. You may be the marketing person at your place of employment, or HR, or accounting. All of those are opportunities because they're in your hand. And don't give me this business about, oh, I need to borrow a bunch of money from the bank. We'll get into that later. But what is in your hand? And I believe a lot of these retooled businesses now that is taking advantage of this new environment, they're going to be outsourcing a lot of their services. For instance, in my firm, there's no need for us to have a full-time IT manager. I can outsource that. There's no need for us to have a full-time marketing person. We are outsourcing that. I now have to sit and think about HR, with this new environment now. How do we manage staff remotely and make sure they're being productive? Maybe there's some tools out there that we need to acquire from an HR consultant. And then accounting, well, to those of you starting businesses, you can't afford a full-time accountant. Guess what? Businesses like mine are perfect for you because we can provide you with the wealth of knowledge that you need without you having to constantly be paying us. Okay. These new businesses are going to be agile businesses. Limited availability of bank financing is going to be out there because the banks get problems of their own, trying to recover on a lot of bad mortgages. So don't say the banks are not lending. The banks are not in the business to finance your business. The bank is in the business of securing people's life savings, and they try to lend it in a conservative manner so that when you come looking for your life savings, it's there. So those of us who say, well, the banks are not lending, let me just put that animal to sleep and say, no, they won't be lending. So you have to be creative and get it from elsewhere. The other thing I see about these businesses, these new businesses, is they're going to be agile in the sense of limited real estate footprint. Businesses that are highly based on brick and mortar, I think you're finding now that I'm paying rent for space that I could hardly occupy. And if in this environment you find yourself that you were doing some business and you didn't really need to be on those premises, then maybe you need to start questioning, do I need all of that space? For instance, for a couple months now, I've been eyeing some space next door to where my office currently is, which would have doubled our footprint. But over the past 5 months or so, I'm looking at this and going, do we really need that space? As a matter of fact, do we need all the space we currently have? And so those of us who are tied to a lot of real estate, watch carefully, and a lot of us realize we can run our businesses remotely from home or limited footprint in a rental space. So those are that. So where are these new businesses going to get their staffing from? I would say those same new graduates, tech savvy people, people who are willing to work remotely. And I would just share this one thing with you before I stop chat. There's some businesses, in as bad as you may say the economy was, as slow as you think things are, there were certain businesses out there that were doing extremely well. As a matter of fact, they were doing so well, they are afraid to say so, and they're embarrassed to say so, because a lot of people were actually hurting. Some of those same businesses that let some people go, well, they realized they cut their overheads. If they can maintain their revenue flows, their profitability has actually increased. All right, so they don't believe everybody out there was hurting. There are some businesses that have done well. Some examples of some businesses that are high growth and was saw some uptick in revenues. If you're in the cleaning services business, you know, like COVID remediation, those were doing well. Delivery services. If you can provide productivity apps, like you can assist with IT and with Zoom and remote access to your server, IT services, they kind of did okay. Digital marketing. My firm is being consultant with a marketing expert now to improve our digital footprint and how do we provide services using our digital platform a little bit better. Then there are remote services. Anybody who could allow me to contact my doctor and get services remotely from my doctor without having to go into his office, that's a good source. And if you're IT savvy and you can provide remote access to service providers, I think that's a good growth area. Certain digital signatures, DocuWare. I've signed so many documents now digitally because physically I can't do it. Those who can assist me in that regard, we find ourselves growing. Agriculture is going to be a high growth area, and you may want to consider that. And digital collaboration tools like this Zoom session that we're in, e-commerce, groceries, and other essentials. And this last one, and then I'm going to stop for now. The last area, education, high growth area. Homeschooling, remote schooling, those are the areas I think where we're going to see great opportunities for new growth. But I will stop there, and if somebody wants to ask me some more questions on homeschooling and remote education, I'll be more than happy to share my views on that. So thank you. Yeah.
No, I said thank you so very much. What we will do is we'll do our second presenter, and then we will have questions at the end.
Sure.
Okay. So thank you so very much. Lots of good information. I'm sure we have some questions.
Sure.
All right. Our second presenter is Pastor Ashton McFall. He's a pastor serving within the Ohio Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. He holds a Master of Divinity from Andrews University. He's a graduate of Northern Caribbean University. He's a father. He is a husband. Our second speaker is Pastor McFall. Pastor McFall.
Thank you very much, Jackie. And I'm so happy to be able to be on the show through this medium, to be able to share with you all. And this is such a good topic of a new perspective at the time of COVID-19. And I remember looking at this when everything first happened in March, and everything started to go on hold and be shut down. We were trying to figure out what is going to happen. And I remember the first time, my church and we decided that we were going to not do in-person worship services. And we were thinking, maybe this is just going to be for, a couple of weeks. We will see what happens, and then we'll be back. And a couple of weeks turned into several months, and folks were anxious. Folks were worried. Folks were scared of, what does this mean? What time are we in? How close are we into to Jesus coming? To Jesus' coming? And I shared with them. I said, I would say this is practice time, right? Keep your eyes focused and steady on Jesus Christ. But when you shared with me the topic, one text came to my mind, and that was Isaiah chapter 43 and verse 19, where the prophets write, "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it?" That text to me is so powerful, because this is a time where a lot of things are unsure. We're not unsure of our future. Mr. Ferguson just spoke about jobs. You may not be able to get your job back, or your job may come back at a reduced salary. You may have to look at doing something else. But God made this promise through the prophet. He said, "Behold, I am going to do a new thing." Now, let's look at the other part that the prophet says. He says, "Do you not perceive it?" So what I realize in looking at the new perspective is that we are so caught up looking at the obstacles that we're not able to perceive the miracles of God. During this time of COVID, I'm going to share 6 quick points with you that we can use to look towards that new perspective. We should not use this time as a time of excuses. Mr. Ferguson touched on that. And to look at all the obstacles. It's easy to look at the what ifs and the can'ts, right? So the first thing I want to share, Christ, when you're looking at that new perspective, and this is from a spiritual perspective, you could apply this personally, or you could apply this within your church that you serve or you work, right? Number one, Christ should be in the center of it all. When you're looking at this new perspective, whether you're trying to get a new job, whether you're trying to do something new in your life, something as simple as it may be, something around the home, within your family, within the church, Christ needs to be at the center of it all, because he is the one who reveals that perspective, who reveals that purpose for our lives. That's number one. Number two, figure out, and this is good. This is really great for those over 40, right, folks.
That's many of us.
Who are trying to do something new. Figure out who you are trying to reach. In the church is vast. You have big churches, you have small churches, you have young churches, you have old churches, and one thing that we do as a church is we try to figure out who is your target audience and who are you trying to reach. When you put on a program, who is it that you're trying to reach? And there are some things that you're going to have to do and learn and adjust in order to reach those folk. So take, for instance, this show, right? You're doing YouTube, you're doing Facebook, you're on the radio. We have these other platforms now, TikTok, Instagram, all type of other stuff that I don't even know. I'm sure my daughter knows it, and she's 8, but I don't know it, right? So you have to figure out how are you going to reach the younger generation, because that's what we're trying to reach. How are you going to reach the younger generation? That's for your church. For you personally, what are your goals, and how do you want to reach and achieve them? Number 3, and this is going to tie everything together. COVID should not leave you the way it met you. It should not leave you the way it met you. I remember when this first started in March, first thing we did, we hopped on Zoom as a church. We worshiped every Sabbath on Zoom. And it was okay. It was okay for them. And then I started to think, and I said, you know what? When I first came to this church, I said, we want to be able to stream on these platforms, YouTube and Facebook. And we kept kicking the can down the road because we didn't know how we were going to do it. We didn't have the talent that can train us and everything like that. And I prayed to God about it. And now COVID put us in this place like we are, and it showed us that we have to change. We were forced to change. And that's not a bad thing. Being forced to change is not a bad thing. And so we prayed. The Lord revealed somebody who can train us to do the streaming. And for the last 2.5 months, my church has been streaming on Facebook and YouTube. And so we thank God that we have these mediums and these platforms that we can reach out to people. How is COVID forcing you to change? How are you growing closer to Jesus Christ because of COVID? How are you changing in your perspective as it relates to entrepreneurship because of COVID? COVID should not leave you the way that it met you. We have to change. We have to change. Use this time to pick up a new skill. I have my daughter started to learn violin not too long ago. So I said, well, if she learns violin, I'm going to learn the guitar. And I've been learning the guitar. That's the new skill that I'm trying to pick up during this time, and I'm not trying to become a rock star, but I just want to be able to play a little something, right? And right. My daughter's going to be able to see daddy is keeping up with his thing. I'm going to keep up with my thing, and and she's going to benefit from it way much more than I will benefit. So how are you changing? What are the new things that you're picking up during this time to fulfill yourself? Allow God let God show you how you can be better, how you can better yourself for your mental health, for your family, for your personal life, for your church. If church is something that you do, right? Don't let COVID leave you the way that it met you. Fourth thing, set short-term achievements that add to your long-term goals. It's scary when you look at the big picture, because that's when you're going to doubt yourself. You're not going to know how you're going to reach that stage, how you're going to get that business, how you're going to learn this new skill. But if you can set, I like to call them low-hanging fruits. If you learn, or if you know how you're going to be able to get that low-hanging fruit, and once you achieve that, you then make that next step and then next step, and then finally, when you actually look back, you realize I reached my goal, because you set you set short-term achievements for that long-term goal. Fifth thing, do not be afraid to fail. If you fail, regroup and restart. Failure is not a bad thing. You get experience through failure, right? You get experience through disappointments. One thing that I love, or let me rephrase it. One thing that I appreciate about the disappointments that I have experienced in my life is that it has shown me how God has used those disappointments for the miracles that I received down the road. Disappointments are not always a bad thing. We grow from them. We grow closer to God because of that. Because we're able to see how what the devil meant for evil, God turned it into good. So don't be afraid to fail. Finally, I learned this in undergrad. My professor, he taught this to us when we were doing a preaching class. He said to us, he said, fight in your own armor. Whatever you do, when you preach, you don't have to be like the next preacher, right? You don't got to be like the big fancy preachers on TV, the TD Jakes, the Carlton Birds, the this, the that. You don't have to be like them, right? Fight in your own armor. Once you have Jesus Christ, you fight in your own armor. So I'm going to tie this to Mr. Ferguson's presentation. When you set up your business, you don't have to look over your shoulder and see what the next man doing. Fight in your own armor. Allow God to talk to you, and you fight in your own armor. When you whatever personal achievement you are setting in your life, whatever spiritual achievement you are set, or spiritual goal to grow closer to God, whatever you're doing, you do it in your own armor. When David went to put on the armor of Saul, didn't fit him, right? Because it wasn't meant for him. Fight in your own armor. Fight in your own armor. And so these are the little brief points that I want to share as you look towards your new perspective in COVID, because things may change, but things aren't going to go back to normal. We are living in a different time, and we have to be able to adapt to that not only in our financial life or physical life, but also in our spiritual life. We have to make adaptations in how we learn, in how we grow, and how we grow closer to Jesus Christ. So that's my little 5
Thank you. That was more than 5 cents. Well said. Well said. I told our guests we will extend a few extra minutes to entertain questions. So could you, if you have any questions in the group, any questions in the chat, let us know. And we will entertain your questions at this time. What is for Mr. Ferguson or for Pastor McFall?
While we wait, what I would just share some of the comments from the chat. Somebody said that they are in trouble. I guess when Mr. Ferguson referred to, I guess 40, somebody says over 40, LOL. Another person says we need to pray. And someone says, why is he bad mouthing us like that? We in over 40. Oh, I'm sorry. The person says, I forget. They still 23. Another person is speaking the truth. Someone says a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. Another person says real talk. Somebody else says fear kills. Another one says in times like this, stand on the promises of Jesus. Someone says agriculture. Amen to that. Then another person says you're on point because everyone needs to eat. So they were just some of the comments that came through on the chat. So like you said, we would open it up for persons if they want to, I guess, unmute their mic, ask a question or make some comment. Another one says a new start begins with a personal relationship with Jesus. Someone says change is inevitable. Another person says, yes, we have to adapt. And someone says, as an intern, I was told to fight in your own armory. So we're open for the questions, the comments.
Okay, questions or comments?
Yes, please
Okay.
proceed.
Comment. Everything I heard this afternoon was well received, and for most of us, I'm sure it will be food for thought. But something also came across my mind, or in my new norm for COVID, and that is us being able to change ourselves. We don't have to wait on our employees to change us. We don't have to wait on nobody to change us, but we adapt based on our situation. For many of us who are over 40, we find ourselves in the category that Mr. Ferguson referred to, where we probably need to be seeking our own employment, becoming entrepreneurs. But also during this time of managing your finances, I want you to think about some of the things that we can do without, some of the things that we are doing that we don't have to do. Let us think about how we're going to spend each dollar. And as I go through this process during COVID, I have already experienced what Mr. Ferguson was talking about in terms of under 40 and over 40. I have already experienced peaking in your job structure. And then when you reach a certain age, it's time to go. This is the new reality, even before COVID. And I was saying to my family, 50 is the new 60. If you manage to make 50, you're doing good on most of these jobs nowadays. So I want us to begin to think of how we can utilize what we have differently. What we need to start with. You are 40, you need to start shedding some of your expenses that you are accumulating that isn't going to create assets for the future. So again, take an inward look at oneself and see how you can make adjustments based on your own spending habits. And I tell you, that will help you navigate yourself better through the new norms of our lives. Thank you.
Wow. Excellent point. Any other? Anyone else?
I have a quick question. First of all, you guys both did a great job, excellent job. This one is directed to Mr. Ferguson. You as an entrepreneur, definitely with any crisis around the world, there's always opening up opportunities. As you mentioned, there were definitely some businesses that definitely grew. What would you say are investment opportunities or also businesses that people could look to get into in the wake of this new economy?
That's an excellent question. Interesting, in my reflections yesterday, everybody said, well, what would Warren Buffett do? And it was interesting that over the past few months, Warren Buffett, with his investment funds, he's been liquidating certain positions that the company has, and he has a stockpile of cash waiting for opportunities to take advantage of. The challenge for him, though, in his annual report was that he made no new investments over the recent period. He's sitting on cash. He's waiting for the right opportunities, but there's just too much uncertainty out there for him to utilize his cash. Now, there's a danger in just holding on to cash. And for somebody like him, and maybe I'll encourage you to just Google him and see what his thought process is, because he's one of the leading money managers in the world right now. So there's a lot of uncertainty out there. And if anybody sit down and tell you they have a crystal ball and they can tell you what's going to happen, we just don't know. So I would say your best investment you can do right now is to invest in yourself.
Understood.
Strengthen that. We always say real estate is always a good investment and the value of real estate doesn't go down. Well, all products is just a subject of who's willing to pay for it. I know that some people who say, well, invest in gold because the dollar isn't worth it. Well, that's because if the dollar isn't worth it, people just lose confidence in that piece of paper.
Yeah.
Why people believe gold, which is a metal, I struggle with this. What's so special about gold that it should be the investment tool? It should be part of my portfolio, but just because it's gold, can I consume gold? Does it increase my health? Does it lengthen my life? So this whole phenomena about investing in gold or metal, I'm sorry, the jury is still out on it for me.
Gotcha.
Because all of us invest in gold, and then what happens? We then all lose confidence in gold, so the value goes. So everything only has a value to the extent that everybody else wants it.
Understood.
Right? So.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah.
A question for Mr. McFall, Pastor McFall.
I have a brief question for Pastor McFall.
You do? Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah. You had spoken about the reluctance in the church, or the lack of talent in getting the digital platform, the streaming platform available. I'm curious that once that was done, did you find that you had difficulty with your congregation in understanding how to use it? How did that process go once you made that change? Did you find that some of your congregants were too old to appreciate the devices and things of that nature?
That's a great question, right? I'm going to tell you the tales of two churches. So currently I have two churches in my bigger congregation, and this is the one I'm speaking about right now. So no, to answer your question, no, I did not have that challenge. Once we found that person to do the training, and we found people who were willing to learn, because the software itself to run the system was relatively simple. Man, listen, my church was they were ecstatic to get this thing rolling, because even though they appreciated being on Zoom, they knew from a larger standpoint, we had to take the church out of Zoom. It was like taking the church out of the four walls, so to speak. And so, the folks, they learned everybody has a smart TV, everybody has a little Roku stick or this or that. So once, even the older members who have their smart TV, once we taught them how to connect to the church and to find us on YouTube, they were happy. So there was no quarrels about investing in the equipment, this being too expensive for that. There was no quarrels about that. There was no issues about doing it. There was none. So I was blessed with that. In my second church, my smaller church, extremely older congregation, and the challenges that lies there were not were not that we don't want to do it. They, how could it be done with the older mindset? And I would use that as an example of, and I'll use that example to say this: it is very important not to wait until it's too late to make the adaptations in your life, or else we will realize that change is definitely going to be hard. Right. And so we're working with them to continue to grow younger. But for my bigger church, where I use that example, there was no issues. Everybody from young to old, everybody was on board. Once the Lord revealed that person who could train and who can be able to help us establish ourselves on those platforms.
Okay, thanks.
Good question. There is a question for Mr. Ferguson. I think it's about A and B, whether the Airbnb business, whether that's a good investment. I think that's the question I see in the chat. Mr. Ferguson?
Yes, excellent question. And I was just having this debate earlier with my family. Airbnb. Asked me that 6 months ago, I would say great, excellent. I know Brother Williams is part of the Small Business Association, and I think really our tourist market, really, we were on the verge of the Bahamian citizen owning our tourist product. And Airbnb was providing the platform for us to do that. One of the things I was concerned about leading into COVID and our migration out of COVID was that whether or not we were going to be held hostage by the large hotel properties that says, well, our tourist market can't get started until the large properties are ready. Then it dawned on me, you know what, with our Airbnb market, that's the perfect way for the average Bahamian to take control of the tourist product. So once tourists were willing to come to the Bahamas, whether or not the big properties were ready to accommodate them, we, the local Bahamians, have taken control of our tourist market. They could stay at our properties. And that was the beauty of Airbnb. So I say it's a great investment. Either you have a Bahamian, a resident next door, or in a property renting from you, or an Airbnb customer, and you can make in 2 weeks, which you can make in a month from a full-time renter. So Airbnb generally is a great investment, and when they can't accommodate it, then you find a local tenant. The challenge is for us, however, is that, and it's going to be interesting to hear what the Minister of Tourism says tomorrow, but this interesting thing about a 14-day quarantine. That 14-day quarantine is being designed now for the large properties. You can come to Atlantis, you can come to Bahama, and you're in pretty much in an all-inclusive environment. And fine, you could do the 14-day quarantine because you'll be in, there's no need for you to leave the property, 14 days or less. The challenge though is, can the average Airbnb, who would want to stay in an Airbnb, quarantine for a maximum of 14 days where they can't leave the property? It's okay if you're at Atlantis because you just go to the marine park, Bahama, or if you're a gambling person, which we don't condone, but you have the casinos there. How are we going to craft these new regulations to accommodate the Bahamians and allow them to regain or re-participate in this tourist market? And I think that's the challenge with the Airbnb. And so the small businessmen among us, Brother Williams and so forth, I think there needs to be a small businessman, business sector ombudsman who can speak to the powers that be and say, fine, I know you're doing this for the big properties, but how are you going to accommodate us? And I would like to think that if I can get a negative test in 5 days, then somebody do the research and find out how long will I be safe before I start shedding and infecting people. And if that means I can stay up to 10 days from my test before I start infecting people, then we just set the standard that you're free to stay at an Airbnb providing your stay is for 3 to 5 days max. And it allows us to get back into the tourist sector and we take control rather than sitting for them to hire to decide when they're ready to open. Because tourists want to come here when they want to come here, not when Bahama and Atlantis is ready. All right. I hope that answers your question. But great investment, I would think, ordinarily.
All right. Thank you so much. I told our guests I would only keep them on 15 minutes beyond the time. This has been a very powerful interview. We've learned lots of information. Knowledge is power. And with that knowledge, you can make better decisions. I want to say thank you to our guests. Normally, I'll give final words, but in the interest of time.
Jackie.
Yes.
We still have another 15 minutes. We can go for another 10 minutes.
Okay. I need to
hear me, Jackie?
Yes. I heard you. We can go another 10 minutes, but I need to get permission from my guest. I think one of my guests probably had to leave.
I'm the teacher at heart, so I'm okay for another 10 minutes.
Pastor Matua?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. You're for good? Another 10 minutes.
Okay, we can go for another 10 minutes. Good stuff. All right. Well, I have a question, and either of you can answer that question. It is said by many that as Christians, you don't need to be concerned about wealth and riches. All you need to do is focus on your eternal home. In light of COVID and the new perspective, do you hold that view? Is that your view? Would you advocate that Christians take that view?
Brother McFall, I defer to you first.
Well, my view is we don't need to kill ourselves trying to become rich, right? Being rich shouldn't be our life's goal. If we are able to find something that makes us a good, comfortable living, praise God. But, being able to, you know, the Bible says that the love of money is the root of all evil. So if our goal is to just get money and pile up money and this and that, then that's that's a wrong perspective, right? But we do have to be able to provide for ourselves. The Lord has made a promise that He will provide for us, but also we have to work, right? By the sweat of our brow, right? So we have to work. We have to find ways to make a living. We don't have to kill ourselves. We shouldn't need to kill ourselves. But we can, as we provide for ourselves and for God, and we trust in Him, the Lord will take care of the rest.
Yeah, I agree. Not working ourselves just to accumulate funds for wealth's sake. But some of us are uniquely gifted. Notice I said some of us, right? Some of us are uniquely gifted in the field of finances and accumulating a certain level of resources. How sad it would have been if the church could not respond to the average citizenry during this COVID period and not help feed the hungry and those who are unemployed. I thought it was an excellent opportunity. We don't have to preach to people, just be God's hand and His heart. And there's a place for wealth in the kingdom. The challenge, I think, for so many of us is when we start accumulating wealth for our own personal stockpile. And we have to be careful. What is it that God is passing to me to pass on to others? Now, I'm not saying I'm a millionaire, but one of the joys that we got as a family during the season was looking at the number of families we could have quietly assist. No fanfare, nothing, but out of our slight overflow, be able to bless somebody else. And I think that was ministry in action and God's love in action.
Wow.
You know, for me, next to your personal relationship with Jesus, right? And it does not matter your church or your denomination. The Bible says in Ecclesiastes, money answered all things. God has blessed us to be a blessing to advance His kingdom. When we as Christians are in a position financially, you're able to help someone. You know, persons are, you're able to show somebody, you're able to teach them how they can stay off the food lines as a result of budgeting, saving, and making wise decisions with whatever the little they have. But even if they have not reached that point yet, and some people have practiced it, and because of COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of their resources has really it has dried up. So now those of us who still can put our hands on $1 or $2, it is not for us to keep. God knew this COVID-19 would happen, and He gives those of us as Christians, the kingdom people now, wisdom that we would store something aside, but it is not for us to keep all for our own purpose. It is to be used now for an opportunity like this to be a blessing, to share, and to help somebody else. And trusting that God now, the same God, the same Christ, will provide for you. And even though your storehouse may be depleted, He is going to refill that storehouse. He only allowed you to store that for a period to be a blessing and to help somebody. Because at the end of this life, when you or me die and our eyes close, we're not carrying anything with us. And so once we have this assurance of that relationship with God, and He uses us now as a channel, that's all we are, you know. We are channel Christians. And whatever it is He blesses us with, we ought to be able to be a blessing to everybody else. So those who say, well, you know, I'm not worrying about wealth here, I can have all of this in heaven. Well, you know, I say, well, if that's what you believe, then to God be the glory for you. But for me, I believe that whatever God has blessed me with must be a blessing to somebody else and not to hoard.
And I volunteer to be one of those channels. How's that?
Any other questions? Can we look in the chat and see if there's any other questions? If there are no other questions, I would like to say thank you so much to our special guests, and I would like to give each one of them the opportunity for a closing remark. Starting with Mr. Ferguson.
Thank you once again for having me. It's been a great way to spend my Sunday afternoon. And to those of you who are 40 years and old, I don't want you to leave here somewhat offended. As a matter of fact, that was a compliment to you. That was an encouragement to say, at this stage in your life, start working your dream. Looking for a job, leave that to, when the Bible says you ought to be a teacher by now, be that teacher, all right? Leave that training stuff for our younger people. But I'll leave you with just 4 key things. Take small steps. Brother McFall mentioned that. Plenty small steps. Don't think about the leaps. It's plenty small steps, daily application. Stay optimistic. You can't grow. You can't achieve anything being negative. So stay away from negative, to anything that's negative. I mean, if somebody can say something positive, run. Optimism is a key. Look at what's in your hand. Stop thinking about la 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 and one day I'll come up with this great business idea. No, your business idea is what is in your hand. Start there, and you can expand from there as other opportunities come. And then just remember, and I thank you, Brother McFall, for mentioning this. Do not fear failure. As a matter of fact, most of us going through school were taught that failure is a bad thing. The reality is failure is part of the process. The only way you grow, the only way you achieve is to look at failure and learn to use it in a positive way. Most people, 99% of them who has achieved anything has experienced some failure in their life. So don't let pride, don't let failure cost you to, it's part of your, like John Maxwell say, fail forward, all right? But failure is part of the growth process. Just get over it quickly and move on. So thank you very much for having me. And that's my 5 cents.
Mr. McFall.
Just want to remind us about the passage again. Isaiah 43:19, behold, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? But in my final words, I'd like to share the previous verse that comes before verse 19, where it says, remember not the former things, nor consider the things of old. So when God is revealing that new perspective to you, when you're moving forward, forget about the former things. Don't dwell on them. You learn from them, but you don't dwell on them, because God never looks back. He takes us forward. And so whatever he has for you in this life, whatever he has for you for your future, whatever that new normal looks like, know that God is the one in charge. Know that he has you in the palm of his hands, and know that he has a new thing for you. That's it.
Thank you so very much to our.
Where does Christ come into this? Where does Christ come into this? When you die, if I die now and all this small step and big step, and what happens after I die and all my dreams and all my aspirations? What happened to them?
All right, I would allow the pastor before we end. Pastor, you want to take that?
Well, I said it at the beginning. You keep Christ in the center. He keeps you. And you know when you're in Jesus Christ, when you die and he wakes us up, we join him in eternity. So everything we do, Christ is always at the center.
Christ at the very center. Once again, thank you so much. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for staying with us to the very end. You have been listening to the program Transforming Lives. We're every Sunday from 4 to 5 on Global 99.5. I would allow the host to give his last comments. Mr. Williams?
Folks, I just want to thank you also for tuning into this program, tuning in every Sunday. We're here 4 to 5 on Global 99.5. On this program, Transforming Lives, we want to thank Sunshine's Deli and Mr. Gardner and Associates. We'll hear more about that next week. who have sponsored this program. As a matter of fact, we got arranged to have him on as a guest. And folks, we acknowledge on this program that a true transformation, a true perspective, a brand new start begins with Jesus Christ. We recognize, my co-host and I, Jackie Gardner, we recognize that without Christ, no transformation can take place. Because at the end of it all, when we'd have lived this life and we die, only what is done for Christ will last. And we better be sure that we have that personal relationship with Christ. And the only way to be sure is now. It must be now, while we are alive now. And so, folks, we thank you for listening, for tuning in, reminding you once again that there's absolutely nothing more important than having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Not your church, not your denomination, not my denomination. We are talking about your personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Dave Williams, Jackie Gardner, host of the program Transforming Lives on Global 99.5, encouraging you to have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.